Welcome into the latest edition of ESPN FC. I'm Dan Thomas, joined by Shaka Hislop and Stevie Nicol as we continue to reflect on Tottenham Hotspur winning that classic Europa League final yesterday, beating Manchester United, of course, at 1-0. And you can see why the Spurs fans were so happy. 17 years they've had to wait until they won silverware. You have to go back, of course, to the League Cup in 2008. But Ange had a premonition in January and decided to follow it through. Here is the Spurs coach.
I think when we got to sort of the end of January, the end of the transfer window, and I kind of assessed our situation, I just made a decision there and then that this was the trophy we were going to go for. And, it probably was at odds with what other people at the club sort of believed at the time we should do. And that's understandable. But I just really believed we could win. We could win this, and sort of everything we've done since then, everything we've done at training, everything we've done in terms of the games, the teams I've selected is about making sure when these games came around, the Europa games, that we're in the best possible condition to tackle them. And that's come at a cost for sure in the league, and I've got to take the responsibility for that. But I just felt like the end game of winning something was more important, and it was the only way I was going to do it.
For more on this, Mark Ogden is here and is the best curtains in show business. Ian Darke joins us as well. We'll be hearing from the boys in a moment. Stevie, as a former coach, do you believe him?
I think I do, yeah. I think if you look at the results and the performances, and again you look at the teams, because a lot of the times you're scratching your head thinking why are certain players not playing? And if you remember, Craig and I had a conversation yesterday about Man United and Spurs, the fact that they are where they are because they knew they weren't going to be relegated. So
this is how it divvies up, basically. Calendar year 2020-24 of the season, won 7 games, won 4 games off. It's not as if they were flying and he decided, right, I tell you what, I need to put all my eggs now in Europe. They were rubbish before, they're rubbish now. It's just kind of worked out for him, hasn't it?
I don't think so. I think it makes sense what he's saying. Because he obviously wants to win Premier League games, and he tried to win Premier League games, but as he said...
he didn't. He didn't try and win, that's what he's just said.
Well,
he just said, I didn't really try.
Listen, he's trying to win the games, but what he's doing is he's prioritising the other tournament, but he's still trying to win the game, still thinking that he's going to put a team on that could probably win, as opposed to, well, I don't care about the Europa League, I'm definitely going to try and win this game in the Premier League. He clearly was making sure that he was looking after the players he wanted to play in the Europa League. He's not got. Why would he? If he was interested in the Premier League games, Dan, he wouldn't have finished 17th.
Why?
Well, because he wouldn't have it.
Why are we giving Spurs so much credit?
I'm not giving Spurs credit. I'm just telling you that
they threw the second half of the Premier League because of the Europa League, because they had to have a full-strength team against some Norwegian side who play near the Arctic. And it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter who the opposition is. He's prioritising playing in the Europa League.
Why does he even have to prioritise?
Well, because does it make any difference if he finished 14th?
Yes, of course it makes a difference.
It doesn't make any difference at all.
If Spurs finished 10th in the table, we're not even having a discussion about his future, but we're talking about his future now because they were so disgustingly horrible, embarrassing, however you want to describe it, in the Premier League, which he says was on purpose because they had to focus on the Europa League because somehow the quality of the opposition in the Europa League mean you couldn't play any sort of game before that.
It's not on purpose. It's not black and white. He's prioritised the Europa League, and it doesn't matter whether he's playing the under-12s in the middle of the Atlantic. It makes no difference. He's making sure that the players he wants for that game are ready for that game.
Come on, Steve.
That's what it is. And that's what he's done. And what he says, whether you believe him or whether you don't believe him, what he's saying reflects in the results that he's got.
But
he's not won Premier League games, but he's just won the Europa League.
What do you make of this, Ian?
Well, I think the big picture is this. Tottenham Hotspur hadn't won a trophy since 2008. They hadn't won a European trophy since 1984. Harry Redknapp couldn't win a trophy. Maurizio Pochettino couldn't do it. Jose Mourinho couldn't do it. Antonio Conte couldn't do it. This fella has, as he promised, delivered a trophy to Spurs. And that's the bottom line of the season. They're in the Champions League next season. Yes, This season's been a write-off for them in the Premier League. All the descriptions you used just there, Dan, about Tottenham's performances are right, but it kind of doesn't matter now. Talk to any Tottenham fan. They are wildly, wildly happy.
No, I absolutely get it, and I've got Spurs fans who've been saying we didn't give them much credit. We kind of have overshadowed what an achievement this is for a side that have fallen short on so many occasions. So I completely understand that from Tottenham Hotspur. But Shaka, what I'm talking about is from a professional manager's point of view to decide, right, I'm going to put all my eggs in this Europa League basket because I need my best team possible to beat AZ Alkmaar, to beat Hoffenheim, to beat these teams that aren't very good.
Bodo Glimt.
Yeah.
Listen, I understand exactly what you're saying, Dan. And while I will concede that Ange Postecoglou makes perfect sense, him saying it now, I'm in the camp that I don't believe it. I don't think I believe it. Now, if he said, come March, he realized, I'm putting all my eggs in the Europa League basket, that's one thing. But January to May is a long old time with a lot of football as a professional footballer, or in this case, a professional manager, to say, I'm not going to be that fussed about the league. I'm not going to be fussed about the FA Cup because January the FA Cup third round hasn't even started yet. I'm not going to be fussed about the Carabao Cup. I'm going to focus solely on this. Now, if in March you realize, listen, we've really been having a tough time with injuries. I can't get players to stay fit with any kind of regularity. I'm making the Europa League, those Thursday nights, my focus. Then I understand. But to make that call about player injuries and player availability and stepping onto the field with the sole intention of winning football games, to make that call in January, I don't think I've ever heard a manager claim as much.
He says he did it at the end of the transfer window, so that's the end of January.
You don't get the point. You're talking about, well, Bodo Glimt, and it's this, and it's Ed Alkmaar, and it's this. That is part of the point, that he knows that he's better than these teams. So he's taken no chances whatsoever. He's going to make sure that he wins these games because he knows that if he wins these games, he's got a chance of winning this tournament, and he's in the final. So actually, the fact that the teams he's playing are not very good is an actually very important point.
So the problem is that we're hanging our hat on Ange Postecoglou doing better in the Premier League if he tried harder.
No, I'm just saying that.
That's my issue.
Let me just speak it dead straight. If he wasn't in Europa League, they wouldn't have finished 17th.
See, I don't know why you say that. I don't know where you've seen this.
But what's your argument to say they wouldn't have? Your argument to say that they wouldn't have is the same as my argument. We don't know. He's telling you.
We do know.
But he's actually...
we do know because they were rubbish when he was trying to do well in the Premier League.
But they're not 17th rubbish. He's sitting telling you... He's just sat there. He's just sat there and told you why they were 17th. Right?
Which I think is very convenient.
But he's actually got a good excuse and a good reason. He can back up winning the Europa League by saying that you can't argue with. Your argument and my argument is not backed up with science that they wouldn't. My argument of they wouldn't have been 17th isn't backed up with anything other than what I think. And it's the same as you, what you're talking to me about. Well, they've been rubbish, so they would have been rubbish.
To that point, whenever I've played in teams that have gone on long cup runs, the league form has always suffered. Not 17th suffered, I freely admit, but the league form has you've always dropped 3 or 4 places. So in that regard, I'm more understanding of what Postecoglou is trying to say. But I just stand by you half a season to go, okay, a little bit less because it's the end of and you just decide, we're going to go Europa League. I just find that a little disingenuous. I find that a little dangerous, in all honesty.
Mark, I like the fact that he's almost painted it like he went up to the Spurs board, went, we're going for Europa no matter what you say about it. I don't care what you want to talk about. I don't care about my contract. This is what we're going to do.
Yeah, it's almost like telling us I was a genius after the event. It's a bit kind of, I was going to do this, but I didn't want to tell anybody until it came true. But the one thing that doesn't stack up... The one thing that doesn't stack up to me is that he's saying that he wrote off the league and everything else in January. They were in the Carabao Cup semi-final at the end of January. They won 1-0 in the first leg. against Liverpool. So does that mean he rolls off the second leg in February because, well, it's Liverpool, so let's not bother. So I think it's almost like he's making it up as he goes along. Look, he's won, so he's able to do that. The winners do write history, as they say, don't they? So he's won the Europa League. It was all part of the plan all along. And, Ange's a genius and he deserves to stay. But the Tottenham fans that I've spoken to the last few weeks were desperate for him to go win or lose. And that's the question now, isn't it? It's whether he survives and whether Tottenham do what Man United did last year and give Ange a reprieve like Erik ten Hag got last year. I don't think he's got the currency at Tottenham to do it, apart from winning this Europa League, which makes him a legend. But they won the Europa League because they beat Man United, the worst Man United team in history, well, certainly the last 50 years. And Man United battered them second half. So Tottenham didn't have a plan. It wasn't like Ange had a master plan to beat Man United. It was basically score a fluky goal, sit deep, and rely on Man United being really bad. So you can't keep a manager in the job because of that. But yes, he's won a trophy, fantastic for him and Tottenham, but you have to look over the broader picture. And I don't think Ange's body of work, even though he meant to lose all those games because it was about the Europa League, I don't think it stacks up.
And it would look kind of cruel and insensitive if they were to make an announcement, say, tomorrow or before Sunday's game. That isn't going to happen. But it will be interesting to see what happens next week from Tottenham and whether a decision had already been made. I thought it was quite interesting in his interview afterwards. Postecoglou said, well, whatever happens, happens. So he kind of knows it's a possibility.
Que sera, sera. Mark, do you know anything in general in life?
No, I'm just coming along, just busting along. Look, I mean, the situation at Tottenham is that I'm pretty sure they'll have a contingency plan. Of course they will. All clubs, all well-run clubs, and Tottenham are a well-run club, will have a plan A and a plan B for if the manager goes. The names that you're hearing are the obvious ones: Andone Areola, Marco Silva, Oliver Glasner. I think Glasner might stay at Crystal Palace now for one more year to give it a crack at the Europa League. And the name that always crops up, and he's not exactly discouraging the talk, is Mauricio Pochettino. Now, I don't think a year from the World Cup he would be brave enough, foolish enough, whatever you want, to walk out of the US job to go to Tottenham. But he still has a place in London. His affection for Tottenham is there. The fans love him. He's got a relationship with Daniel Levy. And Tottenham is a much more attractive job than it was 24 hours ago, because all of a sudden they're no longer a team that hasn't won a trophy for 17 years, a club with a trophy in the cabinet, and they're also back in the Champions League. So it will appeal to a good coach, and I'm sure Spurs have got somebody in mind. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'd imagine Pochettino is the dream scenario, but like I say, it would take a big leap from him to walk out of the US job right now.
Well, he's done such a great job so far. I'd be happy to see him go. Shaka, you're Daniel Levy. What are you doing?
If I'm Daniel Levy, I as I've been saying for the last 3 or 4 months, Postecoglou's got to go. I think from just a business perspective, from a footballing perspective, he's quite simply not done enough. Now, in terms of the emotions of certainly the last 24 hours, you fully understand if Daniel Levy and a lot of those Spurs fans who'd expressed a whole lot of doubt about him feel a whole lot differently at this point. Which brings me back to the Postecoglou press conference, in which I think he's played this perfectly. Now it's making it look like he went to Daniel Levy 4 months ago and said, listen, I never mind the league. We're going to focus on the Europa League. So now if you sack me on the basis, on that basis that we knew we were dismissing the league, then you're awfully wrong for it. And I say that because my point all along for the last 3 or 4 months was there has been no improvement in Spurs. And yes, there's been an injury issue and the length of the injury list. But even those players that he brought in, from week to week, there was no sign of improvement. There was no sign of progress. So why stick with that? But now he's saying there's been no progress because I told Daniel Levy back in January that there's not going to be any.
So what happens at the start of next season? What does he prioritise?
So again, from my perspective, if I'm making this, once he does settle from a purely business perspective, he's got to go. But he's absolutely played this like a fiddle over the last 24 hours. And fair play to him.
Should we talk about Manchester United now?
There goes Bruno Fernandes Ballon d'Or.
Oh, wait, we've got other things to do before that.